Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about Nosferatu, the 2024 adaptation for Robert Eggers. I'm not going to waste any more time. Let's run down some initial facts that may or may not influence you to watch the film. Alright, so we got a film with a 2-hour and 12-minute running time. We have Robert Eggers, who has basically never critically missed. He has made The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, and he gets to excise the from this title of the film, which is Nosferatu. He lives in a pocket of epic historical tales, and he's able to bring those skills to this wonderful adaptation of Nosferatu. The cast includes Lily Rose Depp, who absolutely kills it. I believe that this is hopefully going to erase any bad blood, even though I don't think she really got a lot of that, but if somebody had bad blood for her for what they felt like was a miss with The Idol, which was on HBO in 2023, this will hopefully change their mind. You have Bill Skarsgård, who already kind of had his role as a monster with it, but now he gets to play another type of monster here, and he does a wonderful job. I will say it was kind of hard to assess his acting because he was in so much makeup, and I would love to see behind the scenes of Bill Skarsgård in this film, because I just couldn't really grasp what the acting was, if that makes any sense, even though I know it was there. But regardless, he clearly does a great job. And the whole cast is A1. We have Nicholas Hoult, Willem Dafoe, who I'll talk a little bit about later, has actually kind of already appeared in a film about Nosferatu, and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who also is coming off the backs of a ill-received film with the Craven, that Marvel or the Sony film. So actually a lot of these people in this cast are really great actors who in the past 2 or 3 years have been in films that people didn't like, and guess what? Now they're in this film, which I hope will kind of redirect the conversation more to their skills, which I think is a part of it. It's hard to remember sometimes that actors are really just one very, very small part of any production in the grand scheme of things. And so, unfortunately, sometimes their skills can be dismissed because of the other factors of a production that doesn't really lend itself to putting the actors in the best light. So I put the score composer for this outline because the music in this film was so great, and it really added to a tension that was felt throughout the film. And of course, this goes into the history of the fact that the original 1922 film was a silent film that heavily relied on a musical score to give the energy to the film overall. So Robin Carolan did a great job, and there was a lot of attention I felt that was played also to the mixing of the sounds between the actors' voices, the diegetic sound, and then, of course, the score. The ideal audience for Nosferatu is a horror buff that wants to explore new methods of making people scared. All right, let's get into the source material. Before I get into the source material, let me say a short anecdote. When I left my film, a girl was complaining about how there wasn't even a plot in this film. Now, while I think she simply just doesn't know what a plot means, I feel like we just live in an era now where people just say things they want to sound smart, even though plot, I don't know. I had a lot of questions. Anyway, she doesn't know what plot means. I also think that the reason why she might have felt like there wasn't a plot is because this is a film that has been made several times over, and even not in film version, in television version, in cartoon version. There's probably children's books that are even based off of this. So because of the really wide breadth of Nosferatu and Dracula in general, I think that maybe, I guess, to this woman particularly, there wasn't a plot because it's like we all knew what was going to happen, because of how well trodden the story of Nosferatu has been. So let's get into the history of Nosferatu. So, in 1897, Bram Stoker published the book Dracula, which is now considered a classic in English literature. I won't go over the plot, as I mentioned previously, because if you can understand the words that I'm saying, there's a strong likelihood you already know some variation of the Dracula story. Well, it turns out that German film director F.W. Murnau was also interested in adapting this book. However, he didn't have the money to pay for the film rights. So, with writer Heckril Galen, they came up with a story that they felt made enough changes to differentiate their film from the book. The silent film was released in 1922 and was relatively well received by critics. However, the Bram Stoker estate was not pleased with the unauthorized adaptation of Dracula and sued for copyright infringement. The Stoker estate won, and all copies of the film were destroyed. However, some copies survived, and now the 1922 Nosferatu is one of the most influential films in existence. You can watch the film right now here on YouTube for free if you want to, and it's a great, great film. I watched only the beginning, I'm not gonna lie. I've been tired this whole entire week. But I did watch the beginning of this film, and it's surprising because you would kind of be a little anxious about whether a silent film can keep your attention, especially with all the synapses that have been completely fried in our overindulgent dopamine era. But it is really engaging. So, highly recommend watching that film for free. I also read somewhere that people were saying that Nosferatu was banned in Sweden for being too scary, but I've not found a reliable source that repeats that fact, so that just feels apocryphal, and I'm not going to go too much into that because I don't want to spread something that's not necessarily true. If you do have some primary source material translated to English that shows that Sweden did in fact ban this film, please let me know because I'd like to see it. However, I do want to note that one of the reasons why the film might have been banned or why people might not have been as excited about this film is that many people note that there are a lot of hints in the original film of anti-Semitism, considering stereotypes that were already spreading at that time about Jewish people, and this idea that they were evil and the other. So that might have contributed to why this film could have been banned, because Sweden was like, we saw what y'all did to Jewish people after 1922, and so we don't want this film to perpetuate any negative stereotypes. So that's just an interesting perspective to think about, and I would definitely say that the 2024 version definitely avoids any of those types of stereotypes that could be put onto the Nosferatu character. Okay, the 2024 film is actually not even the first remake, and I'm just talking about the major remakes. There have been plenty remakes, but there was another major remake in 1979 by Werner Herzog, who remade the 1922 film with a cast that made both an English and German language version of the film. That 1979 version was critically well received and relatively commercially successful. Additionally, Murray made a 2000 indie film about the making of the original 1922 film called The Shadow of a Vampire, which stars John Malkovich and also Willem Dafoe up there in the upper right-hand corner. So he plays the actor who played Nosferatu. So this is technically Willem Dafoe's second Nosferatu film. Nosferatu is a classic movie reference and has even shown up in an episode of SpongeBob. So again, don't need to go too much into plot, but I will kind of explore some of my favorite scenes in my analysis of this film, which I hope you guys could tell I really, really like. So the film opens up excuse me, I'm referring to written notes because I wrote ferociously and then I just didn't feel like transcribing on my computer. So anyway, so we actually see this monster in the first scene. It's kind of quick, but it sets up the tone of the film so well. Ellen Hutter is having a dream sequence where it appears that she's making a pact with Nosferatu that she will be with him forever in darkness. For the most part, Nosferatu speaks kind of in non-English and English, so that's a really interesting part. I'm just making this distinction because technically they're in Germany, and it might be confusing because they do use German signifiers when they're referring to somebody, but they're all speaking English. Anyway, there's some linguistic confusion here. We fast forward to several years and we meet Ellen as an older newlywed. She's now a Hutter and she's married to Thomas Hutter, who is played by Nicholas Holt. Ellen has a weird premonition that her husband making inroads in his job is not going to be a good idea. And throughout the film, it's sprinkled with this kind of concept that Ellen has a really strong inclination about a sixth sense about something that is going on that is going to hurt her husband. But her husband goes anyway to his brokerage where he meets his boss, who is essentially kind of going crazy. We see that he has papers in another language, and he tells Thomas Hutter that he actually has to go to Transylvania to execute a deed on some really hunkered down castle in Wisburg is where they're living. Basically, Thomas Hutter's like, I have to do this because apparently he owes one of his friends, Thomas Harding, who's played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, some money, and he wants to buy a house. But Ellen Hutter is like, I don't really need all that, whatever. But he doesn't listen to women, which, quite frankly, the entire plot of this film would be dead if he basically just listened to women. But he doesn't listen to his wife, and he goes on the trip anyway. And while on this trip, he also meets this Romanian slash gypsy. I feel like gypsy is considered a slow now, but tell me whether or not. I think Romy may be how they like to be referred to. Anyway, he meets these Romani individuals who tell him, hey, you know about that Count Orlok that you're trying to see to sign that deed? Do not do that. It's cursed. He has to pay double the price just to stay in the hotel that's going to stay with him. And that night he goes to sleep and he has a quote unquote dream. But it's not really a dream because when he wakes up, he sees that his feet are stuck with dirt. So I love how this film really works with differentiating tone and dream sequences. I feel like with any other director or in any other film, this could feel really overdone because it's like, oh, it was all a dream. It was all a dream, which can kind of be contrived. But in this film, it does a really great job because it sets up this idea that the dream sequence is really just like a third space, a place that we just don't know about as human beings that maybe Nosferatu knows about, but it's kind of just more interesting. And one of my favorite scenes here, it's the first picture I have, is where Thomas Hunt is getting closer to Count Orlok's place and everything goes black and white. And black and white is used very intentionally throughout the film to indicate, whether or not they are in Nosferatu's realm. And this scene was so great. It was so scary while at the same time knowing that nothing imminently was going to happen. But it was just so well shot and the music and the sound was just so entrancing. Anyway, Thomas Hutter makes his way to Count Orlok, and he also gets there in a slightly dream sequence. Of course, we as the audience understand that is because Nosferatu or / Count Orlok cannot interact with human beings while the sun is out. So he's very eager to get this deed signed and he wants it. It's clear that Thomas Hutter is freaked out, but for some reason he still doesn't make his time to leave. Regardless, he gets to sleep, but he wakes up and he finds bite marks into his chest. That's because the night before, when he was eating bread, he cut himself, and I think that just meant Nosferatu / Count Orlok could not handle it. But the second night was he was over it. He had to sign this contract in the Nosferatu language, and he was just freaked the F out. He did not know what was happening. And he tries to escape, but turns out he can't escape. He finds the sarcophagus where Nosferatu sleeps during the day, and he tries to run away, but he's not able to get away until the next morning. He wakes up in his bed, but the wolves are there, and so he has to escape through the window, and he falls off the window into the river. Meanwhile, in Wurzburg, Germany, Ellen is staying with the Hardings, who have gracefully allowed her in their home, but she's being kind of a horrible guest. Not intentionally, but she is having like nightmares and waking up at night and dream walking. And so a doctor comes in and he gives her these opiates and like bloodletting. It's kind of funny because they're clearly referring to like early 19th century kind of outdated medicine at that time, but it's not helping her, and it's clear that she is really pushing the Hardings, again played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, and Emma Corrin, I believe, is who plays his wife, Anna, and they also have 2 daughters, by the way, and that will be significant a little bit later. But yeah, he is she's wearing them out, and they're trying to get a doctor, and the doctor is finally like, you know what? And the doctor is Ralph Ineson, and he's so phenomenal in this scene as well. Dr. Seaver. Dr. Seaver's like, you know what? I remember a professor who helped me. And guess who that professor is played by? None other than Willem Dafoe, Professor Albin Eberhardt. And he kind of describes that Eberhardt kind of went crazy. Also, throughout this, we have a third kind of act going, or a third parallel plot going with the original broker, who has clearly made some pact with Nosferatu and was the one who orchestrated Thomas Hutter going to Count Orlok in order to kind of lure or get Nosferatu close to Ellen so that they can complete their pact together. So anyway, Ellen Hutter, she's going off of it. She's completely losing it, and yeah, the whole entire town is losing it. And Nosferatu is making his plans to get on a ship to get to Wisburg, Germany, while at the same time, she's being examined by Eberhard, who is clear that he kind of believes in the occult, and he was kind of kicked out of the doctor realm because they believe that his occult fascinations were inappropriate for medical kind of environment. So overall, he's kind of right. He knows that Nosferatu is on his way, but ultimately, Holt is saved by this church people. These church people take him and take care of him, and then they take him back to Wisburg, or he forces himself to go back to Wisburg, despite the fact that they believe that as the church they could protect him. But by the time he gets back, Nosferatu is also close on his way back, and by the time Nosferatu is there, he kind of spreads a plague onto the people of Wisburg, and people are kind of seeing it as a true scientific idea, like, oh, this is just some virus or disease being spread. But of course, Eberhard knows that that is not the case, and he's trying to find the connections, trying to figure out where Nosferatu is. And ultimately, they concoct a plan that is just to save face for Thomas Hutter, because he's like, yeah, let me kill him. But it's Ellen that knows that she has to sacrifice herself in order for Nosferatu to be eliminated, as well as the disease. However, before she's able to sacrifice herself, unfortunately, her wonderful, wonderful guests die, including her children, because she made a promise to Nosferatu that she had 3 nights, and until she gives herself to Nosferatu, who's going to kill people. And unfortunately, that meant that he's going to kill the lovely people that gave her housing while her husband was away. So anyway, she gives herself up to Nosferatu, and that's also a really, really beautiful scene. In the sense that there was this eroticism, but it was also like frightening, and I thought that was just such a fascinating dynamic. Nicholas Hoult is unable to kill Nosferatu because that was never the plan, but he's able to make it back just in time to see his wife's dying breath. So I absolutely love this film. I thought Depp, she had to do a lot of these scenes where, you know, she's at times really level-headed and talking to people, and she seems so kind and sad in her eyes, but then when she has to act like she's possessed, there's just real fear about her. And they also don't use any CGI for her face, but she does so well. By the way, I do think CGI would have ruined it, but just to kind of explain that she's able to contort herself so scarily that I don't need CGI. Like, she's just able to get to that place. And she's also able to mix this level of eroticism with this true horror aspect that is just fascinating. The film also gives agency to Ellen by making it clear that she made the choice to sacrifice herself to save thousands of others. She felt like a person living between 2 worlds who recognizes that in order to sacrifice one world, she has to give herself up to another world. So I'm not going to spoil the aesthetics for Nosferatu, but I also want to give props to that aesthetic because it's really impactful how close his face looks like a human corpse, while at the same time not necessarily feeling human. And it's something that's really hard to explain, but yeah, go ahead and watch a film and you'll be able to see how wonderfully intriguing that face is. The score and the sound of the film, I mentioned this already, just phenomenal and really adds to the really great visual affects that are already out there. And I want to give a great shout out to Willem Dafoe, who is a comic relief character, but also he just really embodies this person who knows what's going on and has the right intuition. Overall, this is a great film, and I highly recommend it. Robert Eggers is rumored to make a film remake of The Labyrinth, which starred David Bowie, for those of you who don't remember that scary-ass film that some of our parents made us watch as kids. And I am super excited if that is truly in the pipeline. Until next time, this was Spoiled. Highly recommend Nosferatu. Goodbye, good night, and hope you have a happy New Year's. But I will definitely be back before then.